Hello all, just a little bit of Sunday swatching again. And one of my favourite things to do when I'm just playing with colour is just to pick 3 random colours and mix them up and see see what kinds of things I can get in between, because there's always room for infinite changes of colour. So I've picked out 3 of the Art to Basic colours that I picked up, and I've decided I want to play with green watermelon, coastal moss and indigo, and see what I can kind of cook up in between those. And as you saw, once I've given myself those mixes, I quite often have a little play with a tiny sketch or something like that. We might get that far, and sometimes I throw in a 4th wild card just to add to the mix. So I won't keep you long today. We may or may not get to the sketches, but what I'll start with is my rows and my columns, because that's the way I can keep track of what I've got. I've already given the paints a little spritz of water, so hopefully they're warming up nicely. So I take there's going to be a downwards row, and there's going to be a going acrosswards column. And I'll start with the green watermelon in pole position on both of those. So that's just a little loose rectangle of colour. Oh look, I haven't got myself a piece of paper towel just for drying off the brush. I think we'll take the coastal moss in the next position. It really doesn't matter. This is not science, it's playtime. Although of course it is the science of colour and colour mixing. So in each of these rows and columns, I'm just getting my base colours, and you'll see of course that where those meet, as we start to do the grid, there is going to be a diagonal going down with those base colours as well. I'll show you what I mean. If I go across and down, that one is also going to give me pure coastal moss. And I can also go back in with the green watermelon. Down and across is also going to give me a bit more water on there. Pure green watermelon. And what I quite often do in those ones is give myself, as you can see there, a gradation of tone, so that we stay nice and dark in one corner and see how it pans out in the other corner. Add a little extra pigment to that bottom corner. Nice. And then the indigo. It's going to go up here. Ooh, so much pigment in that. So 2 subtle colours and 1 very strongly pigmented colour. So we're going to find as we play that we'll need to balance so that the indigo doesn't outweigh everything else. So we can just give everything a chance to mix and blend and give us different shadings. Down and across. I'm just eyeballing it. I haven't drawn out a grid. None of that. Who's got time? There are lovely stamps you can get to create colour grids. I haven't got any of those in action at the moment, but I do have some lovely ones somewhere. Another thing to search the stash for. So that's the basic starting point of those. And I realised that what I haven't got is my little plastic mat to do my mixing on. And if I'm mixing colours, I really quite like to have somewhere to mix them. In fact, I might go and find my little ceramic palette, because that would be nice to play with. I'll be right back. And there we are, ceramic palette ready to play. It was, of course, full of the dregs of something else I'd been doing, so I had to give it a little wash out. So I'm just going to mix up a little bit of green watermelon in one of the holes. Just getting a nice bit of pigment into there. A little bit of coastal moss into the one over here. And I can always pop some more in later, so I'm not going to Not going to cook up a massive amount of paint. I'm only doing little dots after all. And pick up some indigo to go here. I might give these another little spritz just to keep them cooking nicely. Let's pick up some more of that indigo into there. Some more of that green watermelon into there. And some more of the coastal moss into there. And then what I'm going to do is going to be in between these two. So it's a little coastal moss and it's a little green watermelon. Mix those two up in there, and that's my very pale version of down and across green watermelon and coastal moss. So you can see that's got a little bit more green watermelon going on than coastal moss, so I'll just mix between the two. And that's a lovely kind of reedy, almost olivey green in there. Going to get a little more colour onto the next one. So a little more green watermelon, a little more coastal moss, and just go for something a bit more pigmented in this go. That's got quite a lot more coastal moss in it, so that'll give us a different kind of in-between shade. And again, a nice variation, infinite variation. See, I don't know about you, but I'm already seeing, probably influenced by that coastal moss name, I'm seeing sand dunes and grasses, maybe some bulrushes. So in between these two, that's going to be green watermelon. And remembering how strongly pigmented the indigo is, I'm going to go gentle with my first little dot of indigo. Ooh, that's pretty. So down and across in there. Oh, look at that. That's a beauty. Sort of, I don't know, ocean turquoise, shall we call it? Get to make up names for them all now as well. And then if I put in another little dot of indigo, we'll get a slightly bluer turquoise across and down to go in that slot. Little variation. Oh, it's pretty. It's pretty. And then finally in between these two, I've got some coastal moss. And again, I'm going to go gentle with the first little dot of indigo. Oh, and that's a beautiful grey-green. Down and across. It's much cooler in tone than the one between coastal moss and green watermelon. Another little dot of indigo into there. And again, really subtle. It's these sort of gradations of colour that thrill me. So close, but not quite the same. And there's a real joy in just that shifting tone and pigmentation. So I am going to go for just a little sketch down here, I think. I'm going to start with some straight coastal moss in there. And just give myself a little beachy starting point. I might go with some straight green watermelon to start with. Give myself a few loose grasses. Just flicking. I'm still working with the thicker brush, so it's giving me quite a lot of body to those grasses. I might take a little bit of my mix here of the green coastal moss to just build up a little bit of shadow in there. Might even take just a touch of that greeny grey. It's giving me a bit of body. Some more of the mix of the coastal moss and the green watermelon. So I'm looking for something in there, that sandy green, to just build up a little bit of background height. Might switch to a slightly finer brush. So that was the number 8 silver black velvet round. This is the number 2, and I'm going to get myself some fairly strong pigment and just again flick some grasses upwards, so you can see I can get a slightly finer look going on. Dripped something on there, let's get rid of that. And before things go too far, I think that bit in the middle is now dry enough that I could risk going in with a little bit of ocean in between. I'm going to stick to the fine brush, although usually you don't want the fine brush for this kind of business. You want as broad a brush as possible. And I really don't mind if it picks up some of the other colours. This is just loose and playing. Gets a little paler towards the horizon, so I might drop in a little bit of extra indigo in the foreground. And of course you want your horizon as flat as possible because water tends to be flat back there. Let's see if we can find a nice sky colour. In fact, I'd chosen Blue Egg as my 4th wild card. So what I might do is let that dry a little bit over here so that I can add some finer work in a minute, whilst I add in to my mix my wild card. And I'm just going to, why not, pop a little bit of it in the middle here. So this is Blue Egg. It's a very delicate pastel. It's got some titanium white in, I believe. So it does give you a whole different world to play with other than these translucents. So I'm just going to pop the Blue Egg there. And then take a little bit of green watermelon at this end. And then bring them together in the middle to see what kind of playtime we get in there. Oh, that soft blue-grey there is making me a very happy woman. And then we'll take the Blue Egg again at this end, bring it across. And then I'm going to take Coastal Moss, bring that in from this end. Got a lot of pigment there, so that's going to want to soften a bit as it reaches Blue Egg. Ho ho ho! Neutrals, these melancholy greys. That's quite a warm grey. That's rather spectacular. And then finally of these 3, let's get our wild card and see what it does when it plays with the indigo. Ah, see, look, that Blue Egg is cooking nicely there now. That's got quite a lot of pigment coming across. Put some more into the centre because it's going to meet indigo in a minute, which, as we know, it's got quite a lot going on. So coming in from here, could do with a bit more water there. Loosen it up. Let it come across. So again, you can see it's not scientific. Oh yes, you see, and what you get in the middle there is a wonderful cerulean blue, which I think might be where I'd like to go for maybe a little bit of sky colour. So I've got the Blue Egg and just the tiniest hint of indigo going on in there. In fact, I might give it a bit more Blue Egg. And a bit more water. I'm not being very disciplined about my clean water pot, but it's less green than this one. Clean water to add to my paints to keep the pigment clear, and the dirty one to wash off the brush. And then I'm just going to give that quite a loose, yeah, it's a barely there sky, which is what I quite like about it. I'm being quite careful around those grasses because they're still a bit damp. But you know, it's a sketch, it's a doodle. Let's take the sky a bit higher up so that we can see it. And it really is a barely there kind of sky. I might pop a couple of little white clouds into it just by picking up with the paper towel. This gives me a bit of variation. Again, I'm going to let that dry a little bit while I have another little play over here. Going to take some Blue Egg. Oh, I might make a leaf with it. Why not? So let's shift that into something a little more dynamic. Little Blue Egg leaf. It's really just a couple of strokes of the brush to meet. And then I'm going to drop maybe a little bit of coastal moss into that as just one stroke. Let it play. And let's start a green watermelon leaf. Might draw that one down into a... Oh, see, the grey that you get from the coastal moss with the blue egg is just a treat. I'm going to use the blue egg to give this leaf a little bulging highlight. So with that, you saw I added the colour right into the middle. This one I'm playing a slightly different game. I'm just adding an extension to the leaf to one side. So you can really mix and match as you choose. Let's start one with maybe green watermelon again. And you can see that's a waterier mix. So while it's nice and watery, I'm going to drop in some little dots of indigo to just spread through there. And just flick up a little bit of colour. Might take myself a blue indigo up here. Don't really want that in that leaf there, so some paper towel will rescue me. And maybe drop in, I don't know, coastal moss, is it? Yeah, look how that makes that paint kick out. It's beautiful. It's got a bit of grainy granulation, I think, the coastal moss. Slightly inclined to make the others go walkabout. I'm going to use a bit of it to just flick some extra stalks in through here. 'Cause why not? And on that front, let's pop a few more into here. I'm going to go direct again with some pigment and just trying to get the slimmest point of the brush onto the paper. Very light. Again, I've dripped some water in there, not to worry, pick it up. A little bit of that. Might take myself a mix of the coastal moss and the green watermelon to get some of those lovely sort of bulrushy colours. Yeah, that's nice. And I might give myself that kind of sense of a few random flower heads in here. Grassy flower heads, obviously, not poppies or roses, but just a bit of texture in there. Nice rough and scruff. I don't know if you can hear the birds outside, they're going a little bit crazy. I quite enjoyed this watermelon, green watermelon with the indigo. And why not add a bit of coastal moss in there as well? So now I'm just going wild card, looking for a bit of shadow colour. In fact, it's going to need a bit more of the brown. Yeah, so I'm just going to give that a good olive kick. Create some darks down at the bottom here. Again, a little bit of texture, just dotting the paint on. A bit of sideways action. Random windswept feel. It's almost ischemic writing. And a little bit more detail over here, shall we? Pop in some little thoughts of movement. I might come back and do a little bit of doodling with some pen into there. And then, of course, my very favourite thing to do, just be, maybe if I've got enough pigment here, give myself a little bit of splatter. And just tapping that brush to get the paint to fly off. Just gives me a bit of texture. So just a little bit of swatching playtime, just to see what those colours will create together. Tiny little beachy sketch, but the real key here is that little colour grid, just showing me that from these three colours I can get myself a whole range of lovely ocean turquoises and meadow grass or beach rushes. Yeah, definitely going to doodle on these leaves. They need lots more detail. And the fourth one, the wild card with the blue egg coming in late on. So that's blue egg, coastal moss, indigo and green watermelon, all by Art to Basic. And they're, yeah, lovely to play with. Thanks so much for dropping by. Enjoy your Sunday.